I wouldn't argue that there's been much change. I don't know. There's been so I think it might have worked out well for some of the chamber favored candidates. That there's been some moderate Dems that you folks have backed that I think maybe have helped push a more business friendly agenda. I wouldn't choose to weigh in on whether that's positive or negative because that's not my role. I think it certainly has led to an interesting U.S. Senate race, and we'll see who emerges.
I was going to ask you about that. Is well, I talked about the U.S. Senate race, so they all know there's a U.S. Senate race, but does the public know there's a U.S. Senate race?
Sure, because they're reading the L.A. Times.
and the Associated Press. Yes.
I had to say that, sorry.
Scintillating stories about the U.S. Senate race.
Yeah, they pay me to say that.
Yeah.
But the Senate race, if I can, but just to roll back to the other question, the one thing the top two system has done is it has made campaigns really expensive. I mean, it has really infused a lot of money into the political system for legislative races in particular.
Because there's competition?
Because there's competition, but it's like, it's competition in an odd way. It's competition where you split out the electorate in unusual ways. You try to outflank a member on their one side or the other of their party. I mean, I went through the money this weekend. There's $10 million in independent expenditures for legislative races so far in this cycle. And most of that money is in probably 4 or 5 races. Do 4 or 5 races really impact the long run of the legislature? I know people who are participating in those campaigns, maybe your organization and others, look at the time, would say yes. But I mean, but that's a decided difference. And maybe the money does equal the competition in a way, but I guess that's the part that I've really noticed is how much more spending we have gotten in that. And I don't know how to measure the true impact of top two, like moderation or centrist, or I don't know what that means.
So I'm going to touch on your native state, North Carolina. Would the U.S. Senate race in North Carolina be bigger news than it is here?
Well, it's a smaller state.
Well, yeah. So I mean, it comes back to, what is important here.
Yeah.
And I was being somewhat facetious. I happen to think that, the 2 senators from California are very important. Are just as important as they are in North Carolina, but nobody knows there's a U.S. Senate race. I mean, the debates were...
It's been remarkably uninteresting.
I think the presidential race has sucked a lot of oxygen out of politics.
Yeah.
I think it has sucked an enormous... I mean, like, I look at the page views of, like, stories on our LATimes.com stuff, and they are all driven by Trump, Sanders, Clinton, Trump, Sanders, Clinton. And so I mean, I don't know what you do with that. I mean, like, even if you write the U.S. Senate stories, you can't lead the horse to water to drink in a way. But I think also, too, that race had the oxygen sucked out of it early when Kamala Harris pretty much, wiped the slate clean of any other major contenders in the Democratic Party who were going to challenge her. I mean, within days, Gavin Newsom, Tom Steyer, Antonio Villaraigosa all took a pass on that race. And so, like, I feel like that the trail of this dates all the way back to her effectively negating her major competition in the first few weeks.
So,
it would have been nice also to see one leading Republican step in to create more. Instead, we have sort of this, we have 3 different Republicans, and so it's unlikely that any one of them is going to emerge because they're just going to split the vote. So, if we had one leading Republican who was challenging for it, then I think that we might have had a greater competition.
Okay, so before I open it up to questions, I think from your profession, you're the people that provide this kind of information to the voters, to the people that don't vote. Do you feel pressure that the readers only want to hear, or your editors only want to hear about what the consequences are to the presidential debate, whether it's, the women's vote or whether it's the immigration or things like that? Are you stuck in, stuck is the wrong word. Are you forced to deal with the issue that the people want to hear about, or are you also, do you feel like you have the business, and I talk about journalism as your business, has an opportunity to go out there and find issues that people don't know? maybe the U.S. Senate rate, but other things that in the budget that you're able to find opportunities there other than this presidential election that's, takes all the air out of the political dialogue.
Well, I'll speak first. I mean, we write about bills in the legislature every day. I'm writing a story right now about the transportation proposals that in the state and what's happening with them and whether there's going to be any movement in the CTC cuts to locals. So whether people read them or not, I can't guarantee. But there's a lot of issues that affect Californians, and we care about them and we want to write about them. And I see that as our role to share that and to share those issues and to talk about them. And because those are the things that affect people, I think, much more almost than what happens in the presidential race, although it's certainly fun to watch, and I read all those stories too.
Now, I was going to say, I don't feel that way. I mean, Juliet and I have a couple of things in common. One is that we're been the longest in the press corps these days. Apparently the whole press corps has cleared out with the exception of a handful of people. But we both run our bureaus for fairly large news organizations, as me, the bureau chief at the Times, and Juliet at the AP. And we have people who are covering those other races. So there's no pressure to not cover stuff out of Sacramento because we've got to get more of the national stuff in there. The challenge has been whether it's Sacramento State House coverage or the U.S. Senate race. Well, actually, let me take the Senate race because I agree. State House coverage, I think we follow what the legislature and what lawmakers are doing. So the budget, bills, policy issues. We wrote a lot about the healthcare tax, the MCO tax,
yep.
And transportation we've all kind of looked at in the ways we can. I'm glad she's writing more on it. The U.S. Senate race, the part of the problem is that the candidates haven't taken that race, in my opinion, I don't want to say they haven't taken it seriously. They haven't taken it in a way to really engage the electorate. I mean, the Kamala Harris campaign is under the radar. It is called Hold On to November. I ain't going out there unless I got to go out there. The Loretta Sanchez campaign hasn't had the money, and she's had some missteps that the press have reported. And that has been, and so I think what's happened is we write those stories, we can write stories about where the candidates stand on issues and how we think the races are going to go. But when the campaigns don't meet you halfway with actual events, policy positions, things, it's like a half conversation in a way. So, I mean, I think we'll continue to do it, but I think that Senate campaign is a great example of, I don't know what's a great example of weirdness. I mean, of a front runner who who wants to stay low as long as she can, and a cast of characters after that who either don't have the resources or the message to find a way to break through. I mean, one more thing on that. If the California Republican Party had put its energy behind a Republican challenger rather than let them all onto their own, maybe that would be a different story.
Right.
But, due respect to the chairman and the party, that's not been their priority. It's been other races.
It's Jerry Brown was running for re-election, but it's Jerry Brown in 2014 where he didn't need to engage.
Right.
He just skated to re-election. Why would he have events? Why would he put money into that race? Let's just skate along into November and I'll do the minimum.